to live even without air. I suppose air is a crutch on which we depend, and earth is a lamentable ball on which we have to stand in order to hold ourselves up. But if you explore deeply into the doctrines and the history of almost all religions whatsoever, you will find that there is simply no do-it-yourself way. Invariably, whatever path and whatever method is followed, there comes a point in which the efforts of one's own will or of one's own ego have to be abandoned. You know perhaps that in Buddhism there are two schools which are respectively called Jiriki and Tariki in Japanese. Jiriki means one's own power. Tariki means another's power. And most forms of Buddhism are classified as Jiriki on the principle of the Buddha's final words to his disciples: "Be ye lamps unto yourselves, be you a refuge unto yourselves,
pleasure and pain, life and death." All these things, or say oneself and the external world, while the self and the other, all these things in the egocentric state of consciousness seem to be separated, opposed to each other. Whereas the most elementary logic should tell us that they necessarily go together. In other words, if you are a superior person in any way, morally, intellectually, physically, you have no means of knowing that you're a superior person except through the presence of relatively inferior people. And were they to disappear, you would be in limbo and you wouldn't know where you were at all. The higher always depends on the lower, in the same way as the flower of the plant depends on the soil, the rose upon the manure. And so too the subjective, the self, goes along with the objective, what the self knows, in an inseparable union. But we have managed to screen this out of our normal consciousness and to conduct our lives as if we could make white exist without black and light without darkness and pleasure without pain. But when the egocentric state is surpassed, it is seen that these things all go together. And the curious consequence of this is not that the world is felt to be a mere balance between opposed forces, not a simple compromise, but somehow it becomes obvious when you see the unity of all opposites that the world is transformed into a thing of glory. It's very difficult to explain that logically, but it simply is so with reference to this different kind of consciousness. In other words, what happens is this, that everything that you tried formerly to exclude and to deny and to overcome is seen to be part of a harmonious construction, so that the whole world is seen as profoundly harmonious. That everything in it is as it should be. And this is so difficult to explain to people who don't see it, that very many people who have this kind of experience remain tongue-tied, both to the state of consciousness itself and to the various means of bringing it about, whether those means be sacramental or whether they be some form of meditation, prayer, or other type of spiritual discipline. In both cases, let me remind you, in both cases, there has always been a certain secrecy about it. Or rather, these things have not been taught to people or given to people who were inadequately prepared. And this is a grave, grave problem in the modern world, because we are today living in a world where there are very few secrets. That is to say, scientific knowledge of any kind is of necessity public knowledge, at least public among scientists. There are types of scientific knowledge, of course, which lay people simply cannot understand, because the language in which this knowledge is expressed, say, for example, mathematical language, has to be learned and is difficult to master. And so many popularizations of scientific ideas are at the same time partial falsifications, because these ideas cannot be said in English or French or German, or even though they can be said in algebra.
So in a way, all knowledge guards itself, because to understand it, you have to follow, to some extent, the path which was followed by the people who discovered it. But nevertheless, as a result of scientific technology in the modern world, an enormous number of things, very dangerous things, are made available to fools. Not to mention the fantastic powers of destruction which technology has given us. And so it is very difficult indeed to keep secrets in this day and age. Everything has been published. All the mysteries practically have been